Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session titled Finding a Role That's Good for You and Good for the World. Deciding on a career is tricky, especially when it seems like there's multiple compelling options. And in this workshop, participants are introduced to Probably Good's self framework, a particular tool to help compare specific roles based on significance, efficiency, leverage, and fit. Using this framework, participants will reflect on decisions they are facing and have the opportunity to discuss their decisions with others. By the end of the workshop, participants should feel better equipped to compare their options and identify concrete next steps towards finding a career that's both fulfilling and highly impactful. Rocky Schwartz is an advisor and groups lead at Probably Good. Rocky has spent over a decade in social impact, including nonprofit leadership, capacity building, and philanthropic advising. She has helped grow several small nonprofits and funds and previously led Effective Altruism in New York City for 3 years. As a reminder, if you have any questions for the speakers, you can submit them via the Swapcard app. I'll be selecting a mix of your questions, and Rocky will be answering throughout her talk. We'll also be staying until 50 minutes after the talk. So if you have any questions in the meantime, you can ask it through the chat. Please join me to welcome Rocky to the stage.
And thank you everyone for joining me today for this, and just for being at this weekend-long event in general, spending this time really thinking seriously about how to do good in the world. If you were tuning in yesterday or are interested after our workshop today, I would definitely recommend checking out yesterday's workshop that I ran on how to actually get an impactful job, which can be a really great complement to what we're going to be talking about in a moment. Kind of the focus today is going to be on how to think about your career, how to plan for your career, and then yesterday's workshop is focused much more on, okay, here's the actual brass tacks of how to go about pursuing the job opportunities that you're interested in. So with this in mind, today we're going to be talking about finding a role that's both good for you and good for the world, which is our mission here at Probably Good. If you're not familiar with Probably Good, we are one of the many resources available to you within the wider effective altruism ecosystem on thinking about your career and thinking about how to have that impact. Our focus at Probably Good is very much on giving you the tools and then supporting you as you reach your own conclusions. So what that looks like in practice, we have a ton of online resources. I definitely recommend spending some time checking out. We have a very extensive career guide that I think is wonderful, profiles on different careers, including many direct stories of people's own personal journeys to career impact, exploration of different cause areas. We have a job board that is now the largest impact-focused job board in the world, and you can search that by any number of criteria, including location. I think you'll see a ton of opportunities around the world that are always expanding. And then we also offer one-on-one advising. And I will plug this probably many times during today's workshop, but we definitely encourage all of you, if you're at this event, you are our target audience for one-on-one advising. And that is a great follow-up to today's workshop too, in terms of really having that opportunity with a member of our team, whether that's me or one of my colleagues, to do that sort of deep dive into your own career plans and get that sort of direct support. So why do we do this? Why do we create kind of this dedicated space for thinking through career options? I think probably many of us are familiar with the idea behind the 80,000 hours name, which is an organization we have a very close relationship with. To frame that a little bit differently, that's looking at about 10 years of your life that are spent working, which is good chunk of time. We think that careers are very much one vehicle to impact, and in many cases, if not most cases, the most important way you can go about having an impact on the world. And the traditional advice that's out there around careers is largely focused on traditional goals, things like financial incentives, things that are not so much focused on what we're doing here in the effective altruism community of really thinking about big problems in the world and the best ways to tackle them. So having these sort of carved out dedicated spaces for this more impact focused advice, our thinking is you kind of can't have too much of this. We recommend really spending quite a chunk of time really diving into your career planning, your career thinking, challenging your assumptions, and having as many kind of moments of reflection and high fidelity conversations with people who share your objectives as possible. So in addition to plugging our own one-on-one advising, I want to just again plug checking out all of the amazing resources throughout the larger community. I know there's been a number of really great talks during EA Connect. We had Kevin from Hive talking about creating your surface area for connections. We had Nina from High Impact Professionals who gave a presentation I loved yesterday. We had a wonderful presentation from 80,000 Hours on planning for your career around the AI transition. So really tapping into these resources, whether they're general or cause specific. So what we're actually going to be looking at today and why the self framework and plug that more information on all of this you can find on our website, including our free career guide. But EA tools in general, I think have done a really great job on focusing on cause prioritization generally. And this is something, again, that I think you kind of can't spend too much time thinking about. One tool that probably many of you are familiar with is the ITN framework, thinking about cause prioritization in terms of impact, tractability, and neglectedness. And in many ways, we see the self framework as kind of a follow up to this, really building off of the ITN framework, but situating it in terms of specific career paths, specific career options that you are considering. So if you were deciding between option A and option B, the self framework can be a great tool to bring into the mix. And that can be in terms of a particular role or a larger career path that you're deciding on. So what we're going to be covering today, we're going to be introducing you to the self framework. We're going to talk about applying the framework to your own interests and your own life. And there will be time for reflection and discussion. This is a little tricky just with the nature of the system Media Connect, but I encourage you all to really actively use the chat. I think seeing what other people are thinking, sharing your own thoughts, this is a great way to really get everyone's wheels turning. And maybe you'll end up connecting with someone in the chat. If you share something around your own interests, that could be a great way to kind of make that signpost for other people who share your interests as well to reach out to you through Swapcard. So please heavily use the chat or ask a question. I will be monitoring it throughout, and you're welcome to say things that are not questions there as well. What we're not going to be covering today. So I think probably for a lot of people attending, this will not be completely new ideas. We're building off of this really long-standing repertoire of career thinking within the EA community. And if you've spent any time on our website, things that might be familiar to you from there. You will probably not be leaving this workshop today with a finalized career plan or with all of the answers. But plugging again, I think one-on-one advising can be a great way to kind of build that out more fully coming out of today. So we're going to start things off with a quick exercise for all of you, which is imagining that you're in this really wonderful position where you actually have multiple job offers. And you can imagine that each of these offers has been presented to you as a high impact opportunity. And all of them you can just step into tomorrow. You have the skills, you have the experience, you're good to go. So the exercise I have for you is to think about how you would actually think about that impact. There might be factors like how direct or indirect it is. Writing down for just a moment what kind of the main ways you would go about thinking about this would be. So what kind of lines of analysis would you follow? What would your big questions be? And with this, there isn't a right answer. This is again just to kind of get your wheels turning. So would love for people to kind of throw in the chat anything that has come up for you as like, okay, just these are the main things that I might use as considerations here. And I'll give you guys just a minute or so to write down either in the chat or through a swap card or more generally anything that's kind of coming up for you from this. Cool. So ho hopefully some things came up for you, and also if you found this challenging, well, you're at the right workshop. So we're going to be diving into this now, and the self framework is, I think, a great tool for this. So, what is the self framework? It is an acronym. The S stands for significance of the problem. E is efficacy of the method or intervention. L is leverage for your specific role within the problem. And then F is fit, everything else, right? For your strengths, your interests, how good of a fit is this role? And in some ways, you can think about this a little bit like an equation, where if you put all the parts together, you end up finding your potential impact through it. You might weigh different parts of this differently. So when we're talking with people in the one-on-one advising context, sometimes I see people where they really have latched onto the problem part, like the S is their big focus, and other times they're really open. Maybe they're, a strong cause agnostic, effective altruist, and they say, wherever I'm most useful. But when you're looking at particular options, you probably want to have some weighting across these. And this might change for you over time. So I think this is a great tool to come back to, especially when you're making a decision. Now, the caveats, because there are always caveats, and there's going to be, this is maybe my most text-heavy slide in today's presentation. So for the first part is career capital matters. In the scheme of all of this, you're not going to always be looking for the most impactful option 100% of the time. There will be times where it makes sense for you to pursue a role, even if it doesn't rank super highly on the self framework. This could be for developing skills, developing career capital in other ways, like building out your network. Frameworks just are a way to simplify reality, right? We are living in a complex world, and this is one tool, again, that you might use to assess things. But there's going to be all of the uncertainties and trade-offs that actually exist in the real world. And your constraints still matter. This is somewhat captured by the F of the framework when we get to that part. But all of these things, all of these elements that determine fit are going to inform your long-term impact. And careers are iterative. We'll be talking about this more toward the end of the workshop today, but we really think about this as, testing your assumptions about the world and refining it over time. Hopefully you get kind of better at using tools like the framework over time because you have more information to operate off of. And then finally, we're just aiming for direction instead of perfection. So it's not always about optimizing the next move, but aiming for a trajectory toward greater impact over time. So diving into the framework, why does problem choice matter? I think the big thing here is that the problem you work on can really determine kind of that multiplier for your impact. Choosing the right problem can mean the difference between, this much impact and 100 times the impact. We've got this lovely chart from Giving What We Can, showing this in the context of particular charities. And the big thing often determining the impact of a charity, certainly it's the actual strategy of the charity, but often it really is that focal area. What is the problem they're looking to solve? So with the first part of the framework, significance, we're thinking about this in terms of kind of the best case scenario. If I were to solve this problem, how much good does that actually do in the world? People are going to weigh this in different ways. Some ways we do this in the effective altruism community, it could just be looking at the number of individuals affected. It could be looking at the severity of the harm involved or the suffering experienced. We may weigh that in different ways. I think there's a lot of really great tools on this we'll touch on in a moment. We might think about the potential for increased welfare and increased well-being. Or we might just think about this in terms of saturation. How neglected is this problem? Are there already a lot of good people, a lot of resources going toward this? One thing we might want to factor in is, could solving one problem actually have this kind of flow through effect where it helps us to solve other problems? A simple example with this, so you've got the kind of malaria as a bit of the OG poster child for effective altruists. And when we look at malaria deaths in Nigeria, we're looking at about 178,000 deaths a year compared to Uganda, where there's still a significant number at 16,000, but significantly less. To put this in perspective, this is about 11.5% of all deaths in Nigeria, compared to about about little more than half of that in Uganda at 6.4%. So when we're looking at this in terms of absolute number of deaths and also percentage of all deaths, seems like Nigeria kind of outranks Uganda here if all else was equal and you were deciding which country to focus your efforts in. Now, there's a lot of things that might complicate this. One really simple one is like maybe you are Ugandan and you just are going to have access to ways of creating impact in your home country compared to a country that you don't have those same connections within. So we'll dive into that a little bit more later on too, but this is kind of very, very simple framing here. We might think about this also in other ways. So with malaria, I think one thing that gets interesting is also just like age distribution of people who are affected by it, where those mortalities are actually happening in terms of, age group in a population. You get into really complicated things with this too. So there's a few great articles from GiveWell thinking about moral weights and ways that different entities, including, big multilateral organizations, weigh a child's death over an adult's death, looking at this in terms of, basically the number of years ahead for the individual who is saved. So you can get into more complicated things there. One frame that you'll hear about in the effective altruism community quite a bit is DALY's, disability adjusted life years. And if you're interested in exploring this more, I think the discussion around moral weights, population ethics, this can be a really interesting one to kind of fall into the rabbit hole of. We might look at this in other ways too. So this is in the animal context, looking at where animals are actually being killed versus where money is already going. So kind of that difference in terms of where the problem is versus where the resources are allocated. So we see in this great chart from animal charity evaluators, most animals are being raised and killed in the food system, but most money is going to animal shelters, so more like dogs and cats. That doesn't mean that the dogs and cats don't deserve attention, but we might say, okay, like if I'm deciding where to donate or where to focus my career energies, it seems like maybe things are more neglected on the farm animal front. We might get more specific with this. So actually looking at, okay, like which particular species are the most affected. And I'll note that we do not include insects in this chart, but we do include all aquatic animals together in the hundreds of millions compared to at the top, those 900,000 cows. That is still a staggering statistic. But all else equal, maybe it's better to focus our energy on some of these higher number populations. We like to talk about things that can seem a little bit weird at first brush in the effective altruism community. So to touch on insects for a moment, this is from a great post on the Effective Altruism Forum by Abraham Rowe, looking at kind of estimates of number of insects and vertebrates killed in different areas. And we're looking at just like extremely big numbers that are far beyond my ability to comprehend. So even if we think that either the likelihood of insects being sentient is lower than other species, or if we think sentience might be a gradient and insects might have a lower level of sentience, maybe these numbers are compelling and outweigh it. Maybe we look at this from a different angle, which is like investments in this industry over time and where the growth is. So we see some like peaks and valleys in terms of where kind of the resource allocation is going toward growing insect farming. From Rethink Priorities, we have a great chart again looking at different species, and this is from 2 years ago, so it was looking 10 years out at where farming is likely to grow the most, which is unfortunately across the board right now. That is the projection that this issue will get worse before it gets better, hopefully. But we're also looking at, again, like most of that growth happening on the insect front. So I think that raises real questions about like, what does this look like in terms of our resource allocation? We talk with a lot of people who are interested in climate, and I think there's a lot of really interesting things to consider there. This is a blurry version of a combo of graphs from Founders Pledge where they're trying to measure expected damage. So looking at different types of damage that could be caused by climate change, the probability of each type of damage, and then that distribution of expected damage across it. So that might be one strategy too, of bringing in kind of that more like probability element. We could also look at things like trends over time, and where there might be more of that traction. So looking at the percentage of the world population that is literate versus illiterate over time, really incredible trajectory. Like I think in the course of 200 years, this is an amazing graph from our world and data. But we might say, okay, this is still a huge issue in some places, right? So we unfortunately don't have a lot of data on many parts of the world, including where I am in the United States, which is its own issue. But we do know from the data that's out there that there are major discrepancies between the countries of the world in terms of literacy rates. And we might also say, okay, maybe this is like a more solvable issue because we've been able to get to such a good place in such a short time elsewhere. And then we can also think about issues that maybe are a little bit harder to quantify. So I think this comes up for a lot of people when thinking about more kind of novel or speculative areas, such as things in the existential risk or global catastrophic risk end of things. I think people have a hard time sometimes kind of wrapping their head around things on the more like AI safety front with this. So we might look at kind of proxies like, okay, what has what does the growth of AI capabilities looks like over time? Another great chart from our world and data looking at AI systems and how they've performed relative to human performance and across a number of areas. And then finally with this, with just, like again, so many things we could talk about here. But I think also just thinking about this in terms of the far future and what this looks like in terms of like how many humans have ever existed, how many humans exist right now, and then our potential over time. This is a giant graph, so this is the zoomed in version, and then the zoomed out version. Pretty staggering, the potential. We in many ways might still be really early in history, and that might make us orient more toward ensuring that things go well for all of those future lives. And if we include other species in here, or other types of minds, other types of individuals, this could look even more significant. So with all of that said, with that overview out of the way, I want you all to spend a moment actually thinking about comparing problems, thinking about a problem or a few problems you care about and how you might put numbers to them. And you can go about this by writing down some like facts and figures, areas where if maybe you could have complete knowledge of the world, you would want to have that information, right? Like if I could just have actual like hard data on anything to inform my priorities and my decision making, what information would I want? And one thing that I really want to encourage you all to focus on in here is what numbers would actually maybe change how you think about things or change what you prioritize. Is there something that maybe you would learn that would make you say, okay, I still care a lot about this problem, but actually I should focus my energies on this other problem instead? And this is, I think, one of the best things that we do in the effective altruism community of really trying to take, again, that like raw information about the world and challenge our assumptions, challenge our kind of like gut priorities and say, okay, yeah, like where is the significance greatest? Where are my efforts best distributed? So I'm going to give you guys maybe about like 3 minutes now with a little background music to write down anything with this. Again, encourage you to put things in the Swapcard questions. Want to have this be, kind of a sounding board as much as possible. And yeah, and then we'll come back together in just about 3 minutes. Cool. So hopefully some, ideas started to come up for you from this. Again, really encourage you all to consider putting things in the swap card questions area as discussion. And yeah, I will be during our little exercises also responding in text to any questions that come in there. So I've started to do that. With this, so if this felt hard, or if it felt easy, but maybe there were some, rabbit holes you were interested in exploring more, there's a lot of great opportunities to learn more. Some resources and areas that might be of interest to this crowd, our world and data, which a lot of those graphs I shared before came from. I think they just have a ton of phenomenal resources and make them very easily digestible through their graphs and other info. Copenhagen Consensus Center is a great and I think sometimes underexplored resource. Rethink Priorities as really a phenomenal research organization within the effective altruism ecosystem, I think is another great one to check out. Open Philanthropy, which I should change this since they are now coefficient giving as a primary funder in this space. They do a great job of publishing their research, publishing their reasoning behind their grant allocations, and I think doing kind of just like a deep dive also into the research that they have so generously made available to the public. This is a great opportunity there too. On the global health front in particular, you might want to check out large multilateral organizations, data and publications like the UN and the World Health Organization. The global burden of disease is a really great scale sensitive overview. So scale sensitive in terms of really incorporating exactly what we were just talking about of looking at, this in terms of all of these elements of where that significance lies. And then on the animal welfare front, I think two great resources. Faunalytics has information kind of across the board, including across different industries and species and globally. And then Welfare Footprint Institute has done a really interesting job of trying to understand different types of suffering that animals experience and how, type of suffering A might compare to type of suffering B in terms of severity. So these are just some starting points. And if this doesn't capture a cause area that you're interested in, also happy to, again, kind of chat in the chat a little bit more about areas you might want to look into for more information there. But moving forward with the framework, we're going to move on to the E, efficacy of the method or intervention. And with this, you can think about this in terms of really kind of your placement in this in terms of that larger ecosystem of people trying to make change. So what portion of a problem could be solved through a particular method or intervention? In most cases, it's not going to be 100%. This is something I think we can kind of fall into a trap of in the effective altruism community of really focusing very heavily on, I'm going to find that one optimal solution. The reality is the world is complicated, and in most cases, you're going to need multiple tools in the toolbox to solve these big, thorny, challenging problems. So with that, it's probably not going to be 100%, but we're really trying to think in expectation. Sometimes there might be what we would consider a hits-based approach of, okay, this thing probably won't work, but if it does work, it might really be a game changer. We can also look at kind of the existing evidence base. So are there studies? Is there existing research? Or is this something that might be a bit more speculative? No one has done it before. This ties in again with that kind of hits-based approach of really trying to say, okay, like the potential here might be worth the low likelihood this actually works out. So we can think about this in some ways in terms of, kind of like if the whole pie is the solution to the problem, your particular organization might just be one chunk of that. I think 30% might be more than in a lot of cases, but if it's a super effective organization, it definitely can be that much. So this is your next little exercise of thinking about, does this actually work? So thinking about a particular intervention or method and thinking about if there might be case studies, existing precedent set, any areas that you could really research to learn more. So consider areas maybe that you've worked on in the past, spent some time reading about, or if you've been in an academic setting, maybe studied in a formal capacity, and really think about what evidence exists either for or against a particular intervention. I think with this is one where, again, kind of tying into the examples that I gave in the significance section, I love the literacy example. So in that case, maybe we would say, okay, with one of those countries that has reached nearly 100% literacy, what worked there that maybe would work in one of those areas where the literacy rates are still low? That's just one example. But I'll give you all about 3 minutes again now to kind of start to brainstorm. Again, this is a great one, I think, to share in Swapcard as just a way to kind of have more of that like sounding board of everyone else who's on the workshop today too. But I'll give you guys a few minutes now for this. Hey, coming back together. So as you were going through this, it hopefully you found some areas that maybe you would want to dig into more. And this can be a little bit of a homework assignment for you all coming out of the weekend of really spending some more time learning about areas that you're interested in, kind of building out your model of the world, and also really looking for reasons that, particular approaches that you're interested in or maybe already working on might not be the best bet. Again, I think this is one of the great things that we do in the EA community of really kind of challenging even things that we've been bought in on of like, okay, is this is this really going to work? Might there be a better opportunity out there? And this is something, again, that I think having conversations throughout EA Connect is going to really be, again, kind of way to get that conversation going and start maybe updating your thinking in different areas. Now, another kind of text-heavy slide for you. How might we actually go about this in terms of looking at that underlying evidence? I think there's a lot of really, really good tools out there. Just super quick overview. So we might look at actual, like formal studies. Randomized control trials are a great example in cases where they're not available. Quasi experiments are another one. Looking at kind of the synthesis, like a meta-analysis, any sort of systemic reviews of what has actually happened kind of in the field. We love cost effectiveness analyses in the EA community. BOTEX, if you're not familiar, this is a back of the envelope calculation. So your best guess basically at putting numbers to something quickly and without complete information. We might kind of look at when evidence is limited, things like mechanistic reasoning or external validity. So like, will results generalize out of one context and into another? I think the literacy example, great one of like, does this actually carry from one region to another? We might look at, kind of ways to test our key assumptions, sensitivity checks, among others. Looking at experts and what they have to say. Forecasting is a really cool tool on this front too, to get a sense of, okay, does this actually seem like, it's likely to lead to the outcome we're expecting? And there's been a ton of great work done in the community to evaluate different interventions. On the global health front, we have organizations like JPAL, Innovations for Poverty Action, GiveWell, the International Initiative for Impact Evaluation. And animal welfare, we have animal charity evaluators, EA funds. In all cases, we might look at relevant foundations that have done analysis of different interventions that they could fund. And again, open philanthropy, now coefficient giving is a great one in terms of really publishing like, okay, this is why we focused in on these particular strategies. And then within climate change, which we talk with a lot of people interested in climate change at Probably Good, we can look at organizations like Giving Green, which is a charity evaluator, Project Drawdown. Founders Pledge has done great work across a number of areas, including more on that kind of catastrophic risk or existential risk front, among others. So lots of great existing work, where also one thing I love about all of these organizations is they post a lot of this publicly. So they try to make it really transparent how they're going about that reasoning. Okay, moving forward in the framework, we have the L, leverage. And we can think about this if we're taking, the strategy, now we're going to bring leverage, we're bringing you into the scene. So this is your actual role within the problem, and within the solution to the problem. So if we had kind of the pie of your organization's impact in the overall solution, how much of your organization's impact are you or your particular role responsible for? We have ways we could evaluate this, that, looking at kind of just like basic ways that we might be able to see where that influence lies. This could be things like, are you actually influencing, financial allocation, where resources are going, what the budget looks like? Are you overseeing others' work, and maybe some sort of managerial capacity, or enabling the overall project, the organization, or maybe the whole space? Maybe you're looking at like a whole ecosystem, whole cause area to grow and actually scale that work. And maybe regardless of scaling, you're actually just increasing efficiency, making it so that the work is going better than it otherwise would have. So we can kind of think about this as like, if within that overall solution, you have your little organizations chunk, now we're going to look at your role within this. So you can imagine maybe organization with 100 employees. Is each employee going to be responsible for 100% of that organization's impact? Or sorry, each 1% for each of the 100 employees? Probably not. Probably we're going to look at some people where they're really in that kind of like linchpin role, where maybe they're responsible for 5% or 20%. So keeping an eye toward those opportunities. Our next little exercise, thinking about what leverage might look like, trying to think about how we can actually spot leverage in the real world. So for an intervention or project that you're interested in, thinking about if you can identify a high leverage role within it. These could be specific people where you're like, okay, clearly clearly they have a lot of leverage in what they're doing. This could also be looking at friction points, right? An area where maybe there's kind of a risk of things not going well, or kind of the dynamics across that ecosystem of people striving for change. A few examples I'll give you with this. I think some of the more obvious ones might be people actually like setting strategy, things like grant makers deciding on resource allocation, but some less obvious ones, I think people who are in more like stakeholder relations type roles can be a really interesting one here. People who are determining the success of something like a, a coalition. We might also look at things that are more behind the scenes, like who is ensuring that an organization is legally compliant and that the work doesn't fall apart for silly reasons. So I'm going to give you guys just a minute to brainstorm here. I know this can be a little bit of a challenging one. And again, encourage you to put things in the swap card questions so that we can get any ideas that you come up with kind of shared collectively. So I'll give you guys just a minute now. Okay, so yeah, curious if you guys found this challenging, easy. I think this is another great one as like a little bit of a homework assignment, but also something to consider asking other attendees or presenters at EA Connect about. I think when people are in the weeds in a particular area, often they have actually an eye toward who are kind of the most high leverage people in their space. This is one of my favorite questions to ask people of like, who do you think is really doing incredible work, whether it's high visibility or behind the scenes? And in those cases, often the people who they identify, it'll vary a lot in terms of what their day-to-day looks like, what their actual kind of direct role in having that impact looks like. So kind of building out your models of not just what actual like cause areas are important to work on, not just what interventions are going to be effective, but what are the most impactful people actually doing and how did they get there? I think this can be a really great thing to just kind of, again, do that further exploration of. Within the framework, so bring this to the final part, personal fit. In some ways, this is the easiest part. In other ways, it can be the most challenging when you're applying this to the real world and kind of understanding, okay, does this role actually fit me? So ways to think about this. You can think about what you're motivated by. So are there particular problems that really excite you? Are there ways that maybe you are more or less comfortable with the directness of the impact? To touch on this a little bit more fully for a moment. Some people want to really get their hands dirty, right? They want to be there on the front line, seeing the individuals they're helping, really kind of like, facing the reality of a problem in the day to day. Other times, people need a little bit more psychological distance and like literal distance. That could lead to things that are, more like behind the scenes work or desk based. This could also lead to more like meta work, right? Things that are on, again, I'll give the grant making example as a way to be like a few more steps removed. I think this is a really important thing to know about yourself of like, what is your comfort with direct versus indirect? There's trade-offs to both. And this can be a matter of, again, kind of like what actually is going to motivate you and also what's going to make this sustainable for you for the long haul. If you aren't going to be able to stomach kind of that direct exposure, that's a really important thing to know. Or if you're not going to be able to remain inspired if you aren't coming face to face with the beneficiaries, that's a really important thing to know too. In the context of cause areas, this might also mean focusing on a near-term issue versus something that is more future-looking, and really understanding again kind of your personal kind of excitement and comfort with both. We might also just look at what you're skilled at. In general, the more skilled you are, the less replaceable you will be. I think this ties in really well with leverage too, right? So looking at not just where there's those points of influence, but also where maybe if you weren't there doing it, no one else would be, or whoever is wouldn't be doing it quite as well as you would with your unique experience and background. The more you kind of can bring that unique edge and identifying that unique edge, the less replaceable you'll be as well. And then also, what are your needs and constraints? What are those, all of those other life factors, right? What salary do you really need in order to be able to live an okay life? Are you bound by certain locations? Other criteria that maybe you need to keep in mind. So in some ways, we can think about fit as like that little intersection of skills, motivation, and logistics. Where do those come together, and what does that look like for you? Now, this can be a tricky one to actually test out, but finding out more about personal fit, I think talking to people actually in the field, understanding their day-to-day experience in their work, this can be huge. You're not going to be able to get as much information from just reading about an organization or reading about a line of work as you will talking to people who are living it day after day. Finding ways to actually practice, right? And practically test. So thinking about things like, an independent project, an internship, a fellowship, a volunteer opportunity. Actually applying for a job, you can learn so much through going through a job application, especially in the EA community where often there will be a work test as some part of that process. That does not mean you have to take the job at the end if you get a job offer, but you can just learn a lot about like, okay, if I've hated this process, maybe this actually isn't a great job for me. And continuing to explore all of the many resources out there through Probably Good, 80,000 hours, animal advocacy careers, just actually like reading about careers, reading about jobs that are out there in the world. Now, all of this is going to come together in developing your career hypothesis. And this will be a little bit of a homework assignment for you all. This is the format for your career hypothesis. The idea with this is that we are changing people in a rapidly changing world. And in many cases, we are kind of gesturing at our best guess of what it looks like to have a career fit and career impact. So with that in mind, we're kind of bringing a scientific mindset to it, where we're developing a hypothesis or multiple hypotheses, and then we're collecting data from our life, from the real world, to bring back to this, to refine it and improve it over time. So that could be big things like a full-time role or even part-time job. This could be small things like conversations you've had, an article you read, how this might update your thinking. Again, in many ways, a simple format, but I think people often find it one of the hardest sentences they will ever actually write. What makes a strong career hypothesis? It should be specific. Like if I'm looking at it, I should be able to say, oh, okay, I can now go to a job board and identify some roles that match it. Right. That does not mean it has to be limited. It doesn't have to say this is a specific organization name, but it should be specific enough someone else looking at it could kind of understand what you're about. It should be plausible. If it requires living in a location you'll never move to or getting a degree you'll never have, probably not actually going to be a realistic fit. And it should be directional. So that doesn't mean that it has to be spot on for that kind of goalpost of what you're trying to change in the world, but it should be part of that winding path. So again, this is the format for it. Would encourage you all to just write this down, spend some time coming up with a few versions of this that you might want to test out. And this will tie in with your next steps. So considering advising as a way to continue this conversation. Can't plug this enough. It is a free resource that we are very happy to offer all of you. Check it out. The link is in the Swapcard chat. Considering just continuing to like learn about the world, whether that's through reading, podcasts, conversations, connecting with more like-minded people, which this event is phenomenal for. I believe there's something like 5,000 attendees through EA Connect. So this is going to be a great platform for finding people who can be those ongoing sounding boards collaborators for you. And my takeaway prompt for all of you is to think about one step that you can actually take in the next week. Maybe that's applying for advising with us. Maybe that's exploring, the actual like data behind a cause area that you've never considered working on to see if you can feel kind of a spark there. But really thinking about, okay, what can you actually do coming out of this event? And we're here to help. Again, tons of resources. Happy to correspond with all of you after this event. Would super appreciate your feedback on this workshop. Were there parts you found particularly useful, or you were like, I have no idea what Rocky was talking about? That's okay too. Would love your feedback if you don't mind filling out our little follow-up survey. You could apply for advising directly through that QR code as well. And I believe we'll be putting in the Swapcard chat as well, the link to that. So we're continuing to refine this workshop over time and would just love your feedback there. And in the final minutes that we have left, well, hopefully you all are filling out this little survey for me, would welcome any questions you have in the chat. And again, if anything we didn't cover today or that you don't want to kind of share with everyone, you're welcome to email us at workshops@probablygood.org. But thank you all. Yeah, I'll check out the chat now for any questions coming in. And if you spot any, Kieran, that I don't spot, please let me know.
Yeah, thank you, Rocky. Thank you for your talk. I think it was so insightful, and I know it's a little bit early where you are right now. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to all the audience who is joining us from all around the world. We're really happy to have you here, and I hope you enjoyed Rocky's talk, and you can keep enjoying EA Connect final day. I'm going to see if we have any questions, but I don't see right now. I think you've already answered them throughout the talk. Yeah, only good comments. Great workshop. Thank you for this. Yeah, it's a pleasure having you, Itamar, Adedayo. And yeah, I think we're on time. So I want to thank you again, Rocky, for being here. Thank you all for joining us on this talk. And yeah, we're having James Rayton from Giving What We Can next. So I motivate you to join that talk after this. Thank you all and have a good day.
Thank you.